The silence of deep space was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of engines and the steady pulse of scanning equipment. Liara sat alone in the control chamber of her small starship. Her long fingers moved carefully across glowing panels as she studied the endless darkness before her. She had been assigned to this patrol for weeks now, tasked only to monitor deep space for unusual signals. Most days she found nothing, only the steady, empty silence that stretched between stars. But today was different. Her ears twitched as the scanner gave a faint alarm. At first she thought it was interference, maybe a dying star's echo. But then the sound repeated, faint, broken, yet carrying a clear pattern. It was not natural. It was not random. It was a signal. Her heart began to race. She leaned closer, eyes wide, as the strange message grew stronger. She adjusted the frequency, her breath catching when she finally heard it clearly. It was a voice, a human voice. She froze, unable to breathe. The word repeated again and again in her mind. Human. Her people had always taught her that humans never existed. Since childhood, she had been told that humans were nothing more than old myths, created to frighten younglings or to explain lost ruins. Humans were stories told in whispers, a warning about chaos and war. The elders always insisted humans never existed, never lived, never walked the stars, and yet, here was proof. Her ship's log displayed the strange audio clearly, a faint broken message filled with static but still carrying meaning. She turned the volume higher and the words cut through the silence. This is an human vessel. Request, help. Her breath caught. She pressed her hand against her chest, her pulse wild. How could this be real? How could she be hearing the voice of a species that never existed? Her first thought was to report the signal to her superiors. That was her duty. Every strange sound, every unusual discovery, always reported to the council. But fear stopped her. She knew what would happen if she told them. They would dismiss it, erase it, and tell her she was imagining things. Or worse, they would accuse her of chasing forbidden myths. Liara remembered the words of her teacher long ago. Some lies are safer than the truth, child. Humans are lies, and those who seek them are dangerous. But as she stared at the trembling signal on her screen, she knew one thing for certain: this was no lie. The voice came again, weaker now, but still fighting through the endless void. Anyone, hear me, human, still here. Her throat tightened. A mix of fear and excitement twisted inside her. If this signal was real, then her people had been lying for centuries. If this voice was real, then a secret had been buried deep, too deep. She saved the coordinates in silence, her fingers trembling. She glanced around the control room even though she was alone, afraid someone might see what she was doing. She copied the data onto her personal recorder, hiding it away beneath her console. Her ship's AI spoke softly, its voice calm. Unusual signal detected. Shall I report it to command? She quickly shook her head, her voice breaking as she whispered, No, not yet. Keep it quiet. There was a long pause, then the AI replied, Understood. For a moment, the silence of space returned. The only sound was the faint static of the human's broken cry. Liara leaned back in her chair, staring at the stars ahead. Questions filled her mind like fire. Why would her people erase humans from history? Why hide them? What were they afraid of? And if humans were truly gone, then who was sending this message now? She closed her eyes, her mind racing. She could still hear the desperation in the voice, as if it were calling directly to her, not to her people, not to the council, just to her. Her heart pounded with a dangerous thought. What if she went there herself? But fear coiled tightly inside her chest. She had been taught her whole life that humans were monsters. If she followed this signal, she might be walking into death. Still, she could not erase the sound of that voice. Human, help. The words echoed inside her, stronger than any order, louder than any lie. Liara stood slowly from her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the console. She knew she had already crossed a line. She had already disobeyed her people by keeping this secret, and yet she felt no regret, because deep inside she knew something important. If humans truly never existed, then this signal could not exist either. And if this signal was real, then everything she had ever been taught was a lie. She whispered softly to herself, her voice trembling with fear and hope. I heard you, and I will find you. Her ship drifted quietly through the void, carrying a secret that could change everything. The faint human signal continued to play, weak and broken, but alive, like the heartbeat of a forgotten truth. And Liara knew her life would never be the same again. Liara could not sleep that night. The signal kept replaying in her mind, faint and broken, but powerful enough to shake her entire world. She knew she could not keep it hidden for long. If command ever noticed the signal in her ship's log, they would ask questions. And if she lied, they would punish her. So, with heavy steps and a trembling heart, she stood before the High Council the next day. The council chamber was massive, filled with glowing pillars and the cold faces of elders who had guided their people for centuries. They sat high above her, their long robes shimmering with authority. Liara's voice was careful as she reported, "My scanners detected a strange signal from the outer rim. It was unusual. It carried patterns, rhythms, almost like a distress call." The chamber fell silent. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Elder Tovin, the oldest of them, leaned forward. His voice was deep and sharp like a blade. "And what do you believe this noise was?" Liara hesitated. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to speak the truth, that she had heard a human voice. But fear clawed at her chest. She lowered her gaze and whispered, "I am not certain. Perhaps a dying beacon. Perhaps an echo of some old technology." Tovan's eyes narrowed. "And yet you brought it before us. Do you suspect something more?" The chamber grew tense. Every council member stared at her, waiting. She could feel their suspicion pressing down on her like weight. Slowly she shook her head. "No, Elder, it was just unusual." For a long time, silence ruled the chamber. Then one of the elders chuckled coldly. "You worry too much, child. These myths infect the young too easily. You must learn to ignore them." Another elder leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Remember this, Liara, humans never existed. They are lies woven by fools and enemies. Chasing such shadows is forbidden." The words struck her like a hammer. She bowed quickly, hiding the storm in her heart. "Yes, Elder, forgive my foolishness." But as she left the chamber, their laughter followed her. It was cruel, dismissive, and heavy with a warning. That night, back on her ship, Liara sat alone in the dark. The council's words echoed inside her, but the signal echoed louder. "Human vessel. Request. Help." Her hands trembled as she unlocked the hidden files in her personal console. Secret archives, old fragments of history, pieces she had collected in silence over the years. She had always been curious. Even as a child, she had noticed how her teachers skipped certain pages in the old records, how they never explained ruins on distant moons that seemed different. And always when she asked too many questions, the answer was the same. Do not speak of humans. They never existed. But here in the darkness, she pieced together fragments that told a different story. Ancient ruins shaped for hands not like her people's. Broken statues with strange faces, too flat, too small, yet strangely familiar. And old, half-erased writings that spoke of beings who had once burned bright across the stars. Humans. Liara's heart pounded as she studied the files. According to these fragments, humans were not myths. They were real. They had once stood tall among the stars. But something happened, something dark. The records ended suddenly, replaced with silence. Her fingers hovered over one cracked data tablet, its surface flickering weakly. She whispered aloud, almost afraid to hear her own voice. "Why hide you? Why erase you?" The room felt colder, as if shadows themselves were listening. She thought of the council's laughter, their sharp warning. They had lied. They had erased the truth. But why? Were they afraid? Or guilty? The human voice returned in her mind, broken but alive. Help, her pulse quickened. She was no longer just curious. She was determined. The next day, she walked through the great archives of her world. The halls were endless, filled with glowing scrolls and whispering machines that stored centuries of knowledge. Officially, she was there for her regular research duties. Unofficially, she searched for the forbidden. But the archives had guardians. An old keeper shuffled toward her, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Liara," he said softly, "you search where you should not." She stiffened. "I am only reviewing old patrol records, Keeper." He studied her for a long moment, then leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You heard it, didn't you?" "The signal." Her blood turned cold. "How do you know?" The Keeper smiled sadly. "Because I heard one once long ago, and like you I was told it was nothing. But child, nothing does not cry for help. Liara's breath caught. Hope and fear tangled inside her. So it's true? Humans, shh, the keeper hissed, glancing around. Do not say it here. The walls listen. The council watches. Some truths are dangerous. He turned away, his shoulders heavy. But if you seek it, beware. The past is buried for a reason, and with that he vanished into the shadows of the archive. Liara stood frozen, her heart pounding. She was not alone. Others had heard it too. Others had been silenced, her hands curled into fists. She could feel it deep in her bones now. The council's lies, the keeper's warning, the signal's desperate cry, all of it pointed to one truth. Humans were real, and someone out there still lived. She looked up at the endless shelves of the archive, her eyes burning with determination. They tried to bury you, she whispered, but I will find you. Her decision was made. No matter the danger, no matter the lies, she would follow the signal. Liara sat in the pilot's chair of her small ship, staring at the glowing coordinates on her screen. The human signal still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat hiding in the dark. She knew what the council would say if they discovered her plan. They would call her a fool, a danger, maybe even a traitor, but she also knew one thing with certainty. If she stayed silent, that voice would fade forever. She could not allow that. Her hands moved across the control panel with hesitation. Every click of a switch felt heavier than the last. When the engines roared to life, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "Forgive me, elders, but I must see the truth with my own eyes." The stars stretched before her as the ship slid out of orbit. She entered the coordinates, and the autopilot set a course through a region known as the Dead Expanse, a stretch of space avoided by almost everyone. The record said nothing survived there, but the human voice had come from its edge. As her ship sped forward, silence filled the cabin again. Only the hum of the engines kept her company. She replayed the signal once more, and the broken words made her chest tighten. Human request. Help. Her heart whispered back, I hear you. I'm coming. Hours turned into days. The Dead Expanse was not empty, it was dangerous. Her ship's scanners lit up with hazards, drifting asteroid fields, old wreckage of forgotten battles, and storms of cosmic radiation. More than once, she thought of turning back. At one point, a massive asteroid rolled into her path, glowing faintly from metallic veins across its surface. She jerked the controls sharply, the ship shuddering as it barely slipped past. Her breath came fast, her hands shaking. This place doesn't want me here, she muttered. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't just space pushing her back. It was fear. Fear of what she might find. On the third day, she stopped to rest. She floated near the ruins of an old outpost, its walls cracked open, drifting silently among stars. It looked ancient, older than her people's records admitted. She moved closer, her ship's lights sweeping across strange markings on the hull. Her breath caught. The symbols weren't from her people. They were sharp, simple, and strangely familiar. She remembered seeing them once before, hidden in forbidden archives, symbols linked to the humans. Her throat tightened. She wanted to go inside, but the outpost was dead, lifeless, with no air, no power. She only whispered to herself, Your shadows are still here. Then her scanner beeped. Another signal, faint but in the same frequency as the first. Her heart leapt. She followed it. The days grew colder, lonelier. Sleep was short. The stars outside began to feel like silent judges watching her. Still, she pressed on. The closer she came, the more the signal sharpened. It was still broken, but no longer fading. Human, alive, please, alive. That word echoed louder than any other. Her people said humans never existed. The council said humans were myths. And yet here was a voice alive, begging across the emptiness. Her doubts began to shift into something stronger, hope. But then, fear returned. What if the stories were true? What if humans were monsters, violent creatures that destroyed everything they touched? She imagined stepping onto some ruined station only to find claws waiting, teeth ready to tear her apart. Her hands shook on the controls, her mind painting pictures of horrors. She almost turned the ship around. Almost. But then she remembered the desperation in the voice. She remembered the old keeper's words in the archive. Nothing does not cry for help. She pressed forward. Finally, after nearly a week, the coordinates reached their end. Her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. and the view made her breath stop. Before her floated the broken remains of a station orbiting a dying star. The star burned faintly, its light weak, casting long shadows across the shattered structure. The station was old, very old. Its metal was rusted and fractured, entire sections missing, drifting in silence. Her scanner confirmed it. The signal came from within. Liara sat frozen, staring at the wreck. Her entire body trembled. This was it. This was the place where the human voice called from. She whispered softly, "You're here, somewhere in there." Fear clawed at her again, but curiosity was stronger. She steered her ship toward the broken docking bay. The walls of the station loomed around her like the jaws of some ancient beast. Her ship groaned as it latched onto the cracked port. The air inside was thin, unbreathable. She pulled on her suit, her helmet sealing with a hiss. Her reflection in the visor looked pale, almost frightened. The hatch opened and she stepped into darkness. The station was silent, dead. Dust floated like ghosts in the dim light. Broken wires hung from the ceiling, sparking faintly. Every step echoed loud in her ears, as if the station itself was listening. Her heart raced. She gripped her scanner tightly. The signal was strong here, louder than ever. "Human, please." The voice was close. Very close. She swallowed hard, moving deeper into the ruins. Every corridor twisted like a maze, every shadow seemed alive. Her fear grew, but so did her determination. At the end of one long hall, she stopped. Her scanner flashed red. Someone was here. Her breath caught as she turned the corner, and in the flickering light she saw a figure that was not alien. Not a myth, not a story. It was a human. The corridor was silent except for the faint crackle of her suit's comm system. Liara's breath echoed inside her helmet as she stood frozen, staring at the figure ahead. For a heartbeat, she thought her eyes were lying. For all her life, she had been told humans never existed. But here, in the flickering shadows of a ruined station, stood proof. The figure swayed unsteadily. His body looked weak, covered in a torn suit of unfamiliar design. His face was pale, hollow, framed by short dark hair and eyes that glowed faintly in the weak light. He was taller than she had expected, his shoulders broad even in exhaustion. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Liara's heart pounded so loudly she thought the human could hear it through the silence. Fear knotted inside her chest. Every story she had heard painted humans as monsters, beasts who destroyed everything in their path. Should she run? Should she raise her weapon? But then the human moved, not with violence, not with anger. He stumbled. His legs buckled under his weight and he collapsed to his knees. A broken cry left his lips. "Help! Please!" The voice was the same as the signal. Desperate, weak human. Liara gasped, her fear cracking like glass. She hurried forward, kneeling beside him. The air inside the station was too thin to breathe, but his helmet was shattered, leaking what little oxygen remained. Without thinking, she pulled a spare respirator from her belt and pressed it to his face. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the human's chest rose sharply and he coughed, his body trembling. Liara's eyes widened. She was touching a living myth. The human's gaze flicked toward her, dazed and filled with pain. His voice was rough, but he forced out words between shallow breaths. You're not human." Liara hesitated. She had no idea what to say. Her people believed humans were lies, and yet this man looked at her as if she were the impossible one. She shook her head slowly, her voice trembling as she whispered through her calm, "No, I'm not, but you are." The words hung in the air like thunder. The human tried to stand, but his legs failed him. Liara caught him before he fell again. His weight was heavy against her, his body shaking with weakness. She guided him carefully, her mind racing with questions. Who was he? How had he survived here? Was he the last of his kind? But she asked none of them. For now, the only thing that mattered was saving his life. With effort, she dragged him back down the corridor toward her ship. Every step felt louder, every shadow heavier. She feared the station itself would collapse on them. But somehow they reached her docking bay. When the hatch closed behind them, sealing the station away, Liara allowed herself a single breath of relief. She lowered the human carefully onto a bunk in her ship's small med chamber. The ship's AI whirred softly, beginning emergency scans. Warning, the AI reported. Life form is critical. Severe malnutrition, oxygen loss, multiple injuries. Immediate care required, Liara bit her lip. She had never treated a human before. She didn't even know if her medical tools would work on him, but she had no choice. Hours passed in tense silence. Liara worked tirelessly, cleaning wounds, stabilizing his breathing, feeding him small doses of nutrient gel. The human remained unconscious most of the time, his face pale and fragile. Every now and then he murmured in his sleep. Words in his strange language, some of which her translator struggled to decode. One phrase, however, came clear enough for her to understand. "Don't leave me." The words pierced her heart. Finally, as the ship drifted quietly in the void, his eyes opened again. They were startling, sharp, deep, filled with something she could not name. He stared at her for a long moment, confusion and disbelief clear on his face. "You saved me," he whispered. Liara swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Yes, I couldn't leave you." He coughed weakly, his lips curling into something she recognized as a smile, small, but real. "Then you're not like the others," her brows furrowed. "The others?" The smile faded. His eyes darkened with pain, memories haunting his expression. "Your people, aliens, they destroyed us, hunted us," buried the truth. Liara's blood turned cold. His words matched the fragments she had seen in the forbidden archives. Her people had erased humans from history, not because they never existed, but because they had wanted them forgotten. She whispered almost to herself, "So it's true." The human's gaze softened as he looked at her. "What's your name?" "Liara," she replied, her voice quiet. "And you?" "Kyle," he said after a pause. "Kale Arden." The names felt strange in her ears, but somehow right. For the first time, she looked at him not as a myth, not as a danger, but as a person. And for the first time, she felt the weight of what she had done. She had saved a human. She had uncovered a truth her people wanted buried forever. Her ship's alarms interrupted the fragile moment. A warning flashed across her console. "Incoming transmission from command." Liara's breath caught. They had noticed her silence. They were calling her back. She looked at Kale, still weak but alive, and fear twisted inside her. If command discovered him, they would kill him. They would silence the truth forever. Kale's hand gripped her wrist weakly. His voice was rough but steady. "Don't let them find me." Liara's heart pounded. She knew he was right. She had a choice to make. Liara sat by the medbay console, her eyes locked on the human lying motionless on the bunk. His breathing was shallow but steady, his chest rising and falling under the thin blanket she had placed over him. Hours had passed since she carried him from the ruins of the station. Every minute had been filled with fear, fear that he might not wake up, fear that her people might track her signal, fear that she had already crossed a line she could never return from. Her ship was quiet, but her heart was loud. The human, Kyle Arden, shifted slightly, a low groan escaping his lips. Liara jumped from her seat, rushing to his side. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly finding her face. "You again?" His voice rasped, weak but alive. Liara let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "Yes, you're safe. You're on my ship." Kyle blinked, confusion flickering in his tired eyes. "Your ship?" He coughed, struggling to sit up. Liara quickly placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, easing him back down. "Don't move too much," she warned softly. "You're still weak. You've been starving and without air for too long. Rest is what you need." He stared at her for a long moment. His gaze was sharp, almost piercing, but behind it was something else, gratitude. "You saved me," he said again, his voice rough. Liara nodded slowly. "I couldn't leave you there." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then maybe not all of you are the same." Her brows furrowed. "The same?" He turned his head away, his expression darkening. Silence hung heavy for several moments before he finally spoke. "Your people, the aliens. They erased us. They hunted us to extinction." Liara froze. Her breath caught in her throat. His words echoed the fragments she had found in the archives, the whispers of truth buried beneath lies. But hearing it from his mouth, hearing the pain in his voice, made it real. "That can't be," she whispered, though she knew it was. Kale's eyes returned to hers. "You already know it's true. Otherwise, why would you be here?" She looked down, unable to answer. For a while, silence filled the medbay. Only the hum of the ship's engines and the soft beep of medical monitors broke the stillness. Liara sat by his side, her mind torn apart by questions. Finally, she spoke. "Why? Why would my people do that?" Why erase you? Kale's jaw tightened. His voice was bitter, heavy with memories. Because humans were not easy to control. We fought back. We asked questions. We didn't bow to their rules. And those who cannot be controlled are always the first to be silenced. Liara felt her chest tighten. So they destroyed you. Kale nodded slowly, his eyes distant. They tried. They came with fleets, with fire and steel. They burned our colonies, shattered our ships, erased us from their records. They wanted us forgotten. His voice broke for a moment, but he steadied himself. But some of us survived. We hid in places they would never look. Stations, ruins, shadows of the galaxy. Liara's hands clenched. She thought of the Council's laughter, the Keeper's warning, the cold lies she had been fed all her life. Anger stirred in her chest. They told me you never existed, she said quietly. That humans were only myths. Kyle gave a faint, tired smile. Myths are powerful. Sometimes they survive longer than the truth. Liara sat back, her mind heavy. She should have been afraid of him. She should have seen him as a threat. But instead, she saw only a man who had lost everything. A survivor clinging to life when the universe wanted him gone. She reached for the nutrient gel, holding it out to him. Eat, it will help. Kyle eyed it suspiciously at first, then slowly took it. His hands shook as he brought it to his lips. He swallowed, grimacing at the taste, but his eyes softened. Thank you. Liara gave a small nod. When he finished, his gaze lingered on her. Why did you save me? If your people hate us so much, why risk everything for me? She hesitated, searching for an answer. At last, she whispered, because I heard your voice, and I couldn't ignore it. You sounded human. The word felt strange on her tongue, but also powerful. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile again. Then maybe there's hope for us yet. Just then, the ship's console chimed. Liara stiffened, hurrying to check it. A cold chill spread through her body when she saw the message. Incoming transmission. High command. Priority level. Her heart sank. They had noticed her silence. They were calling her back. Kale's voice came weakly from behind her. What is it? Liara turned, her face pale. My people. They're looking for me. If they find you. She trailed off, unable to finish. Kale's eyes hardened. He gripped the edge of the bunk, trying to rise despite his weakness. You can't let them know I exist. If they find me, they'll finish what they started. Liara's pulse hammered in her ears. She had saved him once, but now the real test was here. If she answered the Council's call, they would demand explanations. If she ignored them, they would track her. She looked at Kale, his face drawn but his eyes burning with determination. And in that moment, she made her choice. I won't let them take you, she said firmly. Kale studied her, then nodded slowly. For the first time, he seemed to relax. Then you're already different from the rest. As the transmission alarm pulsed again, Liara turned back to the console, her hands trembling. She had no plan, no strategy. Only one truth. She had found a human and she would not betray him. Whatever came next, she would face it. The transmission alarm pulsed again, echoing through the cabin like a heartbeat of doom. Liara's hands hovered over the console, her breath shallow inside her chest. High Command was calling. If she answered, they would demand a report. If she ignored them, they would know she was hiding something. Behind her, Kale struggled to sit up on the medbay bunk. His face was pale, his body still weak, but his eyes were steady. You can't let them know about me, he said firmly. If they discover I'm alive, they'll send fleets. They'll erase me and you. Liara turned to face him. For the first time, she saw not just fear in his eyes, but certainty. He had lived through the horror of her people's betrayal. He knew what they were capable of. Her pulse raced. If I lie, they will know. They always know. They will send ships after me. They will not stop. Kale gave a small, bitter laugh. Then you must choose. Them or me? The words cut deep. Liara closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of her choice pressing heavily on her shoulders. She thought of her people, the world she grew up in, the voices of her teachers, the laughter of the council when she dared to mention humans. She thought of the Keeper in the archives, whispering warnings that the truth was dangerous. And then she thought of Kale's broken voice on the signal, crying across the stars. Human. Help. Her heart ached. The console chimed again, sharper this time. The message scrolled across the screen. Pilot Liara, respond immediately. Failure to comply will result in retrieval order. Retrieval order. Her blood ran cold. That meant they were preparing to send ships after her. She whispered to herself. If I answer, they'll demand proof. If I refuse, they'll hunt me. Kale's voice came quietly. Sometimes survival is not about answering orders. It's about breaking them. She turned sharply toward him. You don't understand. My people, they will destroy me for this. They will call me a traitor. His gaze softened. Then at least you'll fall for the truth, not for their lies. Liara felt her throat tighten. She had never been a rebel, never been brave. She had always followed orders, believed in duty. But now, sitting across from a man who was supposed to be a myth, she realized she could no longer serve lies. Her hands trembled as she reached for the console. The screen flickered, the council's seal waiting to open. For one long moment, she hovered there. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed a different command. Transmission blocked. Her ship fell silent. Liara leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would break her chest. She had just committed the greatest crime of her life. She had ignored high command. Kale watched her, surprise flashing across his tired face. You chose. Liara nodded slowly, her voice shaking but firm. Yes, I chose. But the danger was far from over. The ship's sensors flared to life, alarms shrieking. A red warning blinked across the screen. Multiple vessels detected. Pursuit imminent. Liara's stomach dropped. They've already sent ships. Kale tried to rise, but his legs betrayed him. Then you must run. Her hands flew over the controls, setting new coordinates, engines roaring as the ship prepared for faster-than-light escape. But the fear inside her was a storm. She had turned her back on her people. There was no going back now. As the ship trembled, ready to leap into hyperspace, she turned to Kyle. His face was pale, his body fragile, but his eyes burned with determination. If you're right, she said softly, if my people destroyed yours, then why risk trusting me? Kale gave her a faint, tired smile. Because you didn't leave me behind. That's more than I can say for most. His words hit her harder than any command ever had. The engines flared, and the stars stretched into long white lines as the ship leapt into hyperspace. The sudden silence after the jump was deafening. Liara sat in her chair, staring at the endless streaks of light outside. Her chest heaved with each breath, her mind spinning. She had just declared war with her own people, not with weapons, but with a choice. Behind her, Kale lay back against the bunk, his eyes closing again, exhaustion overtaking him, but before he drifted to sleep, his voice carried across the small chamber. You're the reason humanity still has a chance. Liara's eyes burned. She didn't know if she could be anyone's reason. But she knew one thing, she could not go back. The truth was alive in her ship, and she would protect it no matter the cost. Hours passed in silence. The ship glided through hyperspace, but Liara knew it was only a matter of time before her people found her again. They always found those who disobeyed. She stood, moving quietly to check on Kyle. His breathing was shallow but steady, his body slowly regaining strength. She studied him, marveling at the impossible reality of him being here. A human. Real. Alive. She reached down, adjusting the blanket around him. For the first time, she whispered the truth aloud. A truth she had been too afraid to admit even to herself. They lied to us. You were never gone. Her voice trembled, but the words gave her strength. She turned back to the cockpit, her gaze fixed on the streaking stars. Somewhere ahead, answers waited. Somewhere, the truth was still hidden, and she would not stop until she found it. The stars bent and twisted as Liara's ship tore out of hyperspace. Silence filled the cockpit, heavy and unbroken except for the soft hum of the engines. For a long moment, Liara sat frozen, staring at the endless sea of lights before her. She had done it. She had defied her people, betrayed the council, and protected a human, but there was no triumph in her heart, only a storm. Behind her, Kyle stirred weakly, his voice cutting through the silence. They'll follow you. They won't stop until I'm gone. Liara turned, her throat tight. His face was pale, his body still thin and fragile, but his eyes burned with something more than survival. He wasn't just a man clinging to life. He was a remnant of something far greater, something her people had tried to erase. She lowered her voice. Then we need to make them see. We need to show the galaxy the truth. Kyle frowned, shaking his head. The council controls everything, records, history, the news. Even if you speak, they'll silence you. Liara straightened, determination hardening her voice. Not if the truth spreads faster than their lies. She sat at the console, her hands trembling as she activated the ship's comm system. It glowed faintly, waiting for her command. With one deep breath, she began recording. "This is Pilot Liara," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "For all who hear me, I bring proof that our history is not what we were told. I have found him. A human, alive." Her words echoed through the cabin. She turned the camera toward Kale. He looked uncertain but slowly nodded, sitting straighter despite his weakness. His eyes met the lens, burning with quiet defiance. "My name is Kyle Arden," he said, his voice rough but unbroken. "I am human. My people were not myths. We lived, we fought, and we were destroyed, not by fate, not by nature, but by your leaders. They erased us to protect their power." Liara felt her heart race. For the first time, the truth was no longer whispered in shadows. It was spoken aloud. She ended the recording and, with a trembling hand, set it to broadcast on every open frequency and range. The signal shot out like a flare into the void, racing toward listening ears across the galaxy. The truth could no longer be contained. The silence that followed was unbearable. Liara stared at the console, her chest tight. Had she doomed them both? Would the Council trace the signal and destroy them before anyone else could hear? Her sensors chimed. Dozens of signals lit up across the display. Ships, stations, colonies receiving her message. For a moment, there was no response. Then voices began to flood in, overlapping, confused, fearful. Impossible. Humans were only legends. Is this real? And then another voice. If this is true, the Council has lied to us for centuries. Liara's throat tightened. The reaction was spreading. The Council's grip was cracking. But then the ship's alarms blared again. A hostile signal appeared on her scanner. A fleet. Fast closing in. Kale gripped the side of the bunk, his eyes sharp despite his weakness. They're coming for us. Liara's hands clenched on the controls. Let them. The truth is already out. Moments later, the comm system flared to life. A cold, commanding voice filled the cabin. Pilot Liara, you have broken sacred law. You have betrayed your people. Power down your ship and surrender or be destroyed. Liara's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She opened the channel, her voice steady. I will not surrender. You taught us that humans never existed. But I have proof you lied. The galaxy has heard it now. You cannot silence the truth anymore. The voice on the other end grew harsher. You don't understand the danger. Humans are chaos. They will destroy us all. Kale coughed, forcing himself upright. No, he growled into the comm. You destroyed us. But you couldn't finish the job. The comm fell silent. The fleet outside waited, their weapons armed. Liara tightened her grip on the controls. If they attacked, she and Kale were finished. But even if they died here, the truth would live on. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then a new signal broke through the noise. A civilian channel, raw and unfiltered. We received your message. If humans are real, we must know the truth, another voice followed. The Council lied. We deserve answers. And another. If they survived, we must protect them. Dozens of voices poured in, a storm rising across the stars. The Council's silence only fueled the fire. Kale leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment as if the weight of centuries had finally begun to lift. It's starting, he whispered. The truth is waking up. Liara's chest swelled with a strange mix of fear and pride. She had done what no one else dared. She had broken the silence. Outside, the fleet still hovered, weapons armed. But they did not fire. Perhaps they knew it was already too late. Liara turned to Kale, her voice soft but steady. You're not a myth anymore. You're the beginning. Kale opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. Not just me. Us. The truth belongs to everyone. Liara nodded, her hands steady now as she guided the ship away from the enemy fleet. She didn't know where they would go. She didn't know what battles awaited them. But she knew one thing with certainty. The lie was broken. Humanity was no longer forgotten, and she, once an obedient pilot, had become the voice that carried them back into the stars. The stars stretched endlessly before them, filled with danger but also with hope. Liara whispered to herself, almost like a vow. They told me you never existed, but you do. And now the whole galaxy knows. The ship vanished into the void, carrying with it the spark of a new beginning.